I caught my wife's personal trainer crossing the line, showed up at the gym, exposed his predatory games, and taught him what real strength means. She had been working with this new personal trainer for about 3 weeks, and lately something felt off about the whole situation. "How was your session?" I asked as she walked through the door, gym bag slung over her shoulder. She paused for a moment, longer than usual. "Fine, just intense training, you know." But her body language told a different story. She avoided eye contact, went straight to the kitchen for water, and seemed more tense than someone who just finished a good workout should be. Over the next few days, I started noticing patterns. She had mentioned weird comments her trainer made about relationships, about how most husbands do not appreciate what they have, or how he would tell her she was too good for a regular gym routine. When I asked about these comments, she would brush them off quickly. "He is just trying to motivate me," she would say, but her tone suggested she was not buying it either. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. She walked in looking genuinely disturbed. "Everything okay?" I asked, setting down my laptop. She sat on the couch next to me, fidgeting with her water bottle. "I think my trainer might be, I do not know, crossing some lines." Now she had my full attention. "What kind of lines?" Today he kept adjusting my form by putting his hands on my waist, my shoulders, my back, way more than necessary. And he made this comment about how I must not be getting enough attention at home because I seemed tense. I felt my jaw tighten. He said, "What? It gets worse." When I told him I am perfectly happy at home, he laughed and said something about how all married women say that until they meet a real man who knows how to treat them properly. The audacity of this guy was already getting under my skin, but I kept my voice calm. "How did you respond?" I told him I needed to cut the session short and left, but now I am wondering if I should find a new trainer. The problem is I really like this gym, and switching would be complicated. I looked at my wife, this amazing woman who had been dealing with some predator disguised as a fitness professional, and made a decision right there. "You are not switching gyms," I said firmly, "but I think it is time I met this trainer of yours." She looked surprised. "You want to come to the gym? I want to see exactly what kind of professional we are dealing with here." "Tomorrow is Friday. What time is your session?" 6 in the evening, but you do not have to. I will be there at 5:30. I want to observe this guy in action before your session starts. The next day, I arrived at the gym early and got a guest pass. The place was busy with the after-work crowd, and it did not take long to spot the trainer my wife had described. Tall, overly muscular, with that typical gym bro swagger that screamed insecurity masked as confidence. I watched him work with a female client for about 10 minutes, and what I saw made my blood boil. His hands were constantly on her, adjusting her posture with lingering touches that went way beyond professional instruction. The woman looked uncomfortable, but seemed too polite to say anything. When that session ended, I saw him approach another woman who was working out alone. Within minutes, he was offering unsolicited advice and finding excuses to touch her arm, her shoulder, her lower back. This was not training. This was a predator using his position to prey on women. Then my wife walked in. I watched from across the gym as this guy's whole demeanor changed when he saw her. His smile became more predatory, his posture more aggressive. He immediately walked over to her, and I could see him standing closer than necessary, leaning in when he talked. That is when I knew this situation was about to change dramatically. This was not just some overzealous trainer anymore. This was a guy who thought he could disrespect my wife, make her uncomfortable, and somehow get away with it. I finished my quick workout and approached them as they were setting up for her session. "Hey, honey," I said, walking up with a smile that did not quite reach my eyes. My wife looked relieved to see me. "Oh, this is my husband I told you about." The trainer turned to face me, and I immediately saw the sizing up look in his eyes. He was evaluating me like competition, which told me everything I needed to know about his intentions with my wife. "Nice to meet you," he said, extending his hand with a grip that was unnecessarily firm. "Your wife has been making great progress. She has got incredible potential." The way he said potential made my skin crawl, but I kept my expression neutral. "I can see that," I replied, matching his grip strength easily. "She mentioned you have been very hands-on with her training." His smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "That is how you get results. Most people need that personal touch to really push their limits." "I am sure they do," I said, my tone perfectly pleasant while my eyes stayed locked on his. "I look forward to seeing your methods in action." For the first time since I had been watching him, the trainer looked uncertain. Good. He was starting to realize that this situation just became a lot more complicated for him. I positioned myself at a nearby bench where I could watch the entire training session without being obvious about it. What I witnessed over the next hour confirmed every suspicion I developed about this guy. The trainer, who introduced himself as Chad, started my wife's workout with squats. Normal enough, except his version of form correction involved placing both hands on her hips from behind and staying there far longer than any legitimate adjustment required. "Feel that positioning," he said, his voice carrying across the gym. "You need to really sink into it. Let me guide you through the motion." My wife's discomfort was obvious to me, but Chad either did not notice or did not care. His hands moved from her hips to her lower back, then to her shoulders, maintaining constant contact throughout the entire set. During her rest period, I overheard him making conversation. "You know, most married women lose motivation after a few years," Chad said, leaning against the squat rack. "They get comfortable, stop taking care of themselves. But you are different. You still care about being attractive." My wife shifted uncomfortably. "I just want to stay healthy." "Sure, health," Chad laughed. "But let us be honest, you would not be here if you did not want to look good. Question is, who are you trying to look good for?" The audacity of this question made me grip my water bottle tighter. My wife mumbled something about feeling good about herself, but Chad was not done. "See, that is what I like about you. You are honest about wanting to improve. Most husbands do not appreciate when their wives put in this kind of effort. They get threatened by it." I watched my wife's face tighten. My husband is very supportive of my fitness goals. "Of course he is," Chad said with a tone that suggested he did not believe it for a second. "But support and appreciation are different things. A woman like you needs someone who really sees the work you are putting in." He moved closer to her for the next exercise, bench press. As he spotted her, his positioning was completely inappropriate. Instead of standing at the head of the bench like any professional trainer would, he positioned himself to the side, leaning over her in a way that gave him a clear view down her workout top. "Good form," he said, his voice lower now. "Really push through that resistance. You are stronger than you think." His hands were on the bar, but they kept brushing against her arms and shoulders. When she finished the set, he helped her sit up by placing his hand on her back and keeping it there while he talked. "You know what I think?" Chad said, sitting on the bench next to her, closer than necessary. "I think you are holding back in your workouts. I mean, you are capable of so much more, but something is keeping you restrained." My wife looked confused. "I am giving it my best effort. Are you, though? Or are you playing it safe because that is what you are used to doing?" His voice had taken on this pseudo-psychological tone that made me want to walk over there immediately. Sometimes we need someone to push us past our comfort zones, someone who is not afraid to demand excellence. The implications in his words were crystal clear. This was not about fitness anymore, and we all knew it. During the next exercise, leg curls, Chad's behavior escalated further. He positioned himself where he could watch her form from behind, making comments about her flexibility and how she should really feel the stretch. "Breathe through it," he coached, placing his hand on her lower back again. "Do not fight the sensation. Sometimes the best results come from surrendering control to someone who knows what they are doing." I had heard enough. I finished my own workout and walked over as they were wrapping up. "How did it go?" I asked my wife, but kept my eyes on Chad. "Great session," Chad answered for her. "She's got natural athletic ability, really responds well to firm guidance." The double meaning was not lost on anyone. My wife looked embarrassed. Chad looked smug, and I looked like I was deciding whether to address this right now or handle it differently. "Firm guidance," I repeated slowly. "That is interesting terminology for a fitness trainer." Chad's smile widened. "Results speak for themselves. Your wife has been making incredible progress under my methods." "I bet she has," I said. "And what exactly do your methods involve?" "Personalized attention, hands-on correction, breaking through mental barriers that hold people back." Each phrase was delivered with increasing arrogance. Most people are too comfortable with mediocrity. They need someone willing to push them harder than they would push themselves. My wife started gathering her things, clearly wanting to end this conversation, but I was not done yet. "And you consider yourself qualified to determine what people need?" I asked. 3 years of experience, dozens of satisfied clients," Chad replied. "Especially the women. They appreciate having someone who is not afraid to challenge them." The way he emphasized women made it clear this conversation had nothing to do with fitness anymore. This guy was openly telling me he specialized in pushing boundaries with female clients, and he thought I was too passive to do anything about it. "Challenging," I said thoughtfully. "That is one way to describe it." Chad stepped closer, using his height advantage to try to intimidate me. "Look, your wife came to me because she wanted results. If you are not comfortable with professional training methods, Maybe she should find a trainer who is less effective. The threat was barely veiled. It was essentially telling me that if I had a problem with his behavior, my wife would have to give up her fitness goals. It was manipulation disguised as professional advice. I smiled at him, the kind of smile that should have warned him he was making a serious mistake. You know what, Chad? I think my wife is getting exactly the kind of training she needs. I will be coming to more of these sessions to see your methods in action. For the first time, his confidence cracked slightly. That is not usually necessary. Most husbands trust me to handle their wives' training professionally. I am not most husbands, I said simply. And this is not about trust. It is about making sure everyone understands exactly what professional boundaries look like. Chad's jaw tightened, but he forced another smile. Of course, you are welcome anytime. As we walked to the car, my wife was quiet until we got inside. That was awkward, she said finally. That guy is testing boundaries, I replied. And he just found out where mine are. Over the next week, I made it a point to show up at the gym during my wife's training sessions. Each time, Chad's behavior became more brazen, as if my presence was some kind of challenge he needed to overcome, rather than a boundary he should respect. Tuesday evening, I arrived early and struck up a conversation with the gym manager, a woman in her 40s who seemed genuinely professional. How long has Chad been working here? I asked casually while doing some stretches. About 8 months, she replied. He came with good references from his previous gym. Has he been popular with clients? She paused, and I could see there was more to the story. He is effective with certain clients, though we have had to have a few conversations about maintaining professional boundaries. That phrase told me everything. This was not the first time Chad's behavior had been an issue. What kind of conversations? I pressed gently. The manager looked around, then lowered her voice. Between you and me, we have had 3 complaints in the past 6 months. All from female clients who felt he was too touchy during sessions. Nothing actionable legally speaking, but enough to make us keep an eye on things. 3 complaints and he is still working here? He is very careful about how he operates. Never crosses the line enough to warrant termination, and he always has explanations for his training methods. Plus, he brings in revenue. I filed that information away. Chad was a repeat offender who had learned how to stay just shy of getting fired. That explained his confidence and his willingness to push boundaries. When my wife's session started, I watched Chad put on his usual performance. But today, he seemed determined to provoke a reaction from me. During deadlifts, he positioned himself directly behind her, his chest nearly touching her back as he guided her form. His hands were on her hips, her waist, her shoulders, all under the guise of professional instruction. Feel how your body wants to move, he said, his voice loud enough for me to hear from across the gym. Do not fight your natural instincts. Trust me to guide you where you need to go. My wife completed the set and stepped away quickly, but Chad followed her movement, maintaining that inappropriate closeness. You are tensing up, he observed. Something at home stressing you out? I am fine, my wife replied, but I could see her discomfort growing. Are you, though? Chad pressed. Because I can feel the tension in your muscles. Usually means there is conflict in other areas of life. Maybe some communication issues with your husband. The audacity floored me. This guy was now trying to create marital problems while pretending to be a concerned fitness professional. My marriage is perfectly fine, my wife said firmly. Chad chuckled. That is what everyone says. But the body does not lie. I work with a lot of married women, and they all carry stress differently. The ones in healthy relationships are more relaxed, more confident, they move with freedom. He was essentially telling my wife that her marriage was the problem, while positioning himself as the solution. Classic predator behavior. What are you implying? My wife asked, clearly frustrated now. I'm not implying anything, Chad said with fake innocence. I'm just saying that when women feel truly appreciated, truly valued, it shows in how they carry themselves. You seem like you are holding something back. That is when I stood up and walked over. How is the session going? I asked, my tone friendly, but my eyes locked on Chad. Just helping your wife work through some tension, Chad replied, that same smug smile plastered on his face. She has been carrying a lot of stress lately. Has she? I said, looking at my wife with genuine concern. Anything I should know about? My wife shook her head quickly. It is nothing, just normal workout tension. But Chad was not done stirring the pot. Sometimes tension comes from feeling unappreciated. Women need to feel valued, truly seen for who they are. When that is missing at home, it manifests physically. The implications were getting more direct. He was now openly suggesting that I was not meeting my wife's needs while positioning himself as someone who could. Interesting theory, I said calmly. And you have developed this insight through your extensive training in psychology? Chad's smile faltered slightly. I have worked with enough women to recognize patterns. Patterns? I repeated. Like what, exactly? Like how married women respond to male attention when they are not getting enough at home. They light up when someone really pays attention to them, really focuses on their needs. He was being so blatant now that even other gym members were starting to notice. A couple of women nearby had stopped their workouts to listen, and I could see them exchanging glances. So, you make it your business to provide that attention? I asked. I provide professional training services, Chad said, but his tone suggested he provided much more. If clients feel valued and appreciated during that process, that is just good customer service. Customer service, I said slowly. Is that what you call it when you tell married women they are not appreciated at home? Chad's confidence was building again. He seemed to think he was winning this conversation. I call it honesty. Most husbands take their wives for granted. They stop seeing them as attractive, desirable women and start treating them like roommates. The guy was now openly insulting me while hitting on my wife. His arrogance had reached levels that demanded a response. And you do not take them for granted? I asked. I see every woman who trains with me as someone special, someone worth investing time and attention in. That is why they get results with me that they do not get elsewhere. He was practically advertising his services as more than fitness training at this point. My wife looked mortified, but Chad seemed oblivious to how inappropriate he was being. Fascinating approach, I said. And how many of these special women have you helped feel properly appreciated? Chad's chest puffed out with pride. More than I can count. Women remember how it feels to be treated like they matter. That is when one of the women who had been listening nearby walked over. She was probably in her late 30s, fit and clearly agitated. Excuse me, she said to Chad. Are you talking about treating women like they matter? Chad turned toward her with that same predatory smile. Always happy to help, because I remember how you treated me like I mattered, she interrupted. Right up until I told you I was not interested in your after-hours training sessions. Then suddenly my form was terrible, and my attitude was the problem. Chad's face went pale. I do not know what you are talking about. Sure you do not, she said loudly enough for half the gym to hear. Just like you do not remember telling me my husband probably did not appreciate my flexibility or suggesting I might benefit from private sessions at your apartment. More people were paying attention now. Chad looked around nervously, realizing his reputation was about to take a serious hit. That is a misunderstanding, he said quickly. The only misunderstanding, I said, stepping closer to him, is thinking this behavior would continue without consequences. Chad looked between me and the growing audience, and for the first time since I had met him, he looked genuinely worried. The next evening, I arrived at the gym 10 minutes before my wife's session. Chad was working with another female client, and I watched him dial back his usual behavior significantly. Word was apparently spreading about yesterday's confrontation. When my wife arrived, Chad's demeanor was noticeably different. Gone was the overly familiar touching and the inappropriate comments. He kept a professional distance and focused strictly on exercise instruction. For about 20 minutes, I thought maybe the message had finally gotten through to him. Then his ego kicked in. During a lap pull to down exercise, Chad positioned himself behind my wife to spot her. As she completed a rep, he leaned down and said something in her ear that made her stiffen immediately. I could not hear what he said, but her reaction told me it was not about proper form. She turned to look at him with obvious disgust, but Chad just smiled and stepped back. That is when he noticed me watching and decided to escalate things deliberately. Your husband has been keeping a close eye on our sessions, Chad said loudly enough for me to hear. Must be nice having someone so protective. The way he said protective made it sound like insecure. My wife looked uncomfortable with the attention this was drawing from other gym members. He is just being supportive, she replied quietly. Sure, Chad said, his voice carrying that familiar condescending tone. Though I have got to wonder if all that supervision comes from trust or from knowing he cannot compete. I stood up from my bench and walked over. Compete with what exactly? Chad turned to face me with renewed confidence. Being called out yesterday had not humbled him. It had just made him more determined to prove his dominance. Just making conversation about different training philosophies, he said with fake innocence. Training philosophies? I repeated. And what philosophy involves telling clients their spouses cannot compete? The philosophy that believes in pushing people beyond their comfort zones? Chad replied, stepping closer to me. Some people are naturally more aggressive, more willing to take what they want. Others are more passive. He was now openly calling me passive while positioning himself as the aggressive alpha. The insult was clear to everyone within earshot. "Interesting theory," I said calmly. "Care to elaborate on what you think you want to take?" Chad's smile widened. He thought he was winning this psychological game. "I think some men know how to appreciate what they have, and others just assume it will always be there." My wife looked mortified. "Can we please just finish the workout?" But Chad was not done proving his point. "You know what I have learned, working with women. They respond to confidence. Real confidence, not the kind that needs backup or supervision." He was directly challenging my presence at the gym while insulting my masculinity in front of my wife. The guy had apparently learned nothing from yesterday's humiliation. "Real confidence," I said thoughtfully. "And you consider yourself a good example of that?" "I consider myself someone who is not afraid to go after what he wants," Chad replied, his chest puffing out. "Some guys talk, some guys actually perform." The sexual innuendo was blatant now. He was essentially telling my wife that he could satisfy her better than I could, all while standing 3 feet away from me. "Perform," I repeated slowly. "Like a personal trainer who hits on married clients? Like a man who recognizes quality when he sees it?" Chad shot back, and is not afraid to let that quality know it is being wasted. That crossed every line. He just told my wife she was wasted on me right to my face in front of a gym full of people. My wife stepped back, clearly disgusted. That is completely inappropriate. But Chad misread her disgust as playing hard to get. He moved closer to her, close enough that she had to take another step back. "What is inappropriate is settling for less than you deserve," he said, reaching out to touch her arm. That is when I stepped forward and grabbed his wrist before his hand could make contact. "The only thing that is inappropriate," I said, my voice deadly calm, "is thinking you can put your hands on my wife." Chad tried to pull his wrist free, but I maintained my grip. He looked surprised by my strength. "Let go of me," he said, trying to sound commanding, but coming across as nervous. "Gladly," I replied, releasing his wrist. "Right after we established some boundaries." Chad rubbed his wrist and stepped back, but his ego would not let him back down completely. "Boundaries? You mean like the boundary between a weak man and a strong one?" The insult hung in the air like a challenge. Several people had stopped their workouts to watch what was unfolding. "Weak," I said, nodding slowly. "Is that what you think I am?" "I think you are a man who needs his wife supervised because he knows he cannot satisfy her," Chad said, his voice rising. "I think you are threatened by real men who know how to treat women properly." My wife's face flushed with anger. "How dare you speak to my husband like that?" But Chad was too far gone to care about her reaction. He had committed to this confrontation and was determined to prove his dominance. "I am speaking the truth," he said, turning back to me. "Your wife deserves someone who appreciates her body, someone who knows how to make her feel like a real woman." He actually reached toward my wife's waist as he said this, as if to demonstrate his point about appreciating her body. That is when I grabbed his wrist again, but this time I did not let go. "You want to know the difference between weak and strong?" I asked, my voice still calm despite the fury building inside me. Chad tried to pull free, but quickly realized he could not let go of me right now. "The difference," I continued, "is that weak men need to touch women without permission to feel powerful. Strong men earn respect without laying a finger on anyone." I squeezed his wrist just hard enough to make my point. Chad's face went pale as he realized the strength difference between us. "You are hurting me," he said, his bravado evaporating. "No," I replied calmly. "This is restraint. Hurting you would be responding to your disrespect the way it deserves." Chad looked around desperately, realizing that his intimidation tactics had backfired spectacularly. The audience he had wanted to impress was now watching him get humiliated by the weak husband he had been insulting. "Look, this is just a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "The only misunderstanding," I said, finally releasing his wrist, "is thinking you could disrespect my wife and walk away unchanged." Chad rubbed his wrist again, his confidence completely shattered. "What is that supposed to mean?" I smiled at him, the kind of smile that promised consequences were coming. "It means your education and respect is just getting started." Chad rubbed his wrist, rage building in his eyes. The humiliation of being physically restrained was eating at him, and I could see his desperation to salvage his reputation. "You think grabbing my wrist makes you tough?" Chad said, his voice shaking. That was a cheap shot. Several gym members gathered around, sensing this was not over. My wife moved closer to me, wanting to leave, but Chad was not done. "How about we settle this properly?" Chad challenged. "See who is actually man enough to back up their talk." He was challenging me to a fight. His ego could not handle being shown up. Settle what exactly? I asked. Whether you can handle real competition or if you are just another weak husband who talks big, Chad said, rolling his shoulders. My wife tugged my arm. Let us just go. He is not worth it. Chad smirked. Listen to your wife. She knows you cannot handle this. You are right, I said. I should listen to my wife, especially when she is trying to protect you from something you are not prepared for. Chad laughed. Protect me from what? From learning the difference between gym muscles and real strength? Chad's face darkened. You think I am all show? Let us do this properly, arm wrestling right here, right now. The crowd murmured with anticipation. Someone dragged over a bench. When you lose, I said, you apologize to every woman you have harassed and explain your methods to the manager. Deal, Chad said confidently. We locked hands. Chad immediately put everything into it, his face straining for 30 seconds. Our hands stayed vertical as I let him exhaust his power. Then I started applying pressure. Slowly, steadily, I forced his hand down. Chad's eyes widened as he realized he was losing despite everything he had. This is impossible, he gasped. This is real strength, I replied. The kind that does not need to prove itself by disrespecting women. I slammed his hand down. Chad stared in disbelief, but his ego would not accept defeat. In his frustration, Chad swung a wild punch at my face. I caught his fist in my palm. Chad's eyes went wide. Now you have committed assault, I said calmly, in front of witnesses with cameras recording. I applied pressure to his trapped fist until he dropped to one knee. Please, Chad gasped. I am sorry. Tell that to my wife and every woman you have harassed. Chad looked up with tears in his eyes. I am sorry. I disrespected you and your marriage. I was wrong. The gym manager stepped forward. Have you been harassing clients? Chad nodded miserably. Yes, I will resign immediately. Sirens approached as someone had called 911. Paramedics arrived and examined Chad's hand. No serious damage, but enough pain to remember this lesson. As they loaded him onto a stretcher, Chad looked back at me. I understand now, he said quietly. I understand the difference. My wife and I walked to our car in silence. I cannot believe that happened, she said. Some people only learn through consequences, I replied. Chad just got the education he needed. The police finished taking statements and the video evidence made everything clear. Chad had thrown the first punch and I had acted in self-defense. Multiple witnesses confirmed his pattern of harassment toward female clients. 2 days later, the gym manager called me personally. I wanted to thank you, she said. After what happened, 3 more women came forward with complaints about Chad. We should have acted sooner. What is being done about it, I asked. He has been terminated permanently. We are also implementing new policies for personal trainer conduct and mandatory training about professional boundaries. Plus, we are reviewing all past complaints more seriously. The manager paused. We would also like to offer you and your wife complimentary memberships for the next year as an apology for what you both endured. Word spread quickly through the gym community. Women who had been uncomfortable with Chad's behavior finally felt safe to speak up. It turned out his pattern went back years across multiple gyms. My wife found a new trainer within the week, a professional woman who focused on results without drama. During her first session, I watched from across the gym as she worked with genuine enthusiasm, free from the stress Chad had created. How is the new trainer? I asked afterward. Amazing, my wife said, her smile genuine for the first time in weeks. Actual professional instruction, no inappropriate comments, no unnecessary touching, just good training. That evening, she brought up what had happened. I still cannot believe you handled that situation the way you did, she said. Most men would have either ignored it or lost their temper immediately. I was not going to let someone disrespect you, I replied. But losing my temper would have made me the problem instead of the solution. The way you stayed calm until he crossed the final line, that was impressive. Calm does not mean passive, I said. Sometimes protecting what matters requires patience until the right moment. A week later, we heard through the gym grapevine that Chad had been arrested. Apparently, one of the women who came forward had evidence of him making unwanted advances outside the gym. His pattern of behavior finally caught up with him legally. The gym's new policies were working well. Trainers now worked in more visible areas. Mandatory reporting procedures were established, and clients felt comfortable raising concerns without fear of retaliation. My wife's confidence returned quickly. Without Chad's psychological manipulation, she threw herself into her fitness goals with renewed energy. Her new trainer helped her achieve better results in 1 month than Chad had delivered in 3. I realized something my wife told me after a particularly good workout. Chad was not trying to make me stronger. He was trying to make me dependent on his validation. Classic manipulation tactic, I agreed. Make someone question their worth, then position yourself as the solution. But you never made me feel like I needed protecting. You just protected me when it mattered. That was the difference. I had not tried to control the situation or my wife's choices. I had simply made it clear that disrespect would not be tolerated, then followed through when necessary. 3 months later, we ran into Chad at a grocery store. He was working the checkout line, his gym career apparently over. When he saw us, his face went pale. "Sir," he said quietly as he scanned our items. "Ma'am, I hope you are both doing well." His demeanor was completely different. Gone was the arrogant predator who thought muscles made him untouchable. In his place was someone who had learned that real strength comes from character, not physical intimidation. "We are doing very well," I replied evenly. Chad nodded, avoiding eye contact. "I am glad, and I am still sorry about everything. I learned a lot from what happened." As we walked to our car, my wife reflected on the encounter. "He seemed like a completely different person," she observed. "Sometimes consequences are the best teacher," I said. "Chad learned that being strong and being a bully are opposite things." "And what did you learn?" she asked with a smile. "That protecting what matters does not require violence or drama." The gym became our regular routine again, but now it was what it should have been from the beginning. A place to work on fitness goals without drama or harassment. My wife achieved every goal she had set, working with trainers who respected her as a person rather than seeing her as a target. Chad's replacement was a professional in his 50s who treated every client with genuine respect. The difference was night and day. 6 months later, the gym asked me to speak to their staff about recognizing and addressing inappropriate behavior. I agreed, not because I enjoyed the attention, but because other women deserve to work out without harassment. The key, I told the staff, is understanding that real strength protects others. Fake strength preys on them. When you see the difference, you know exactly which kind of person you are dealing with. That lesson served us well beyond the gym. My wife knew she was with someone who would stand up for what mattered, and I knew she was someone worth standing up for. Chad learned that muscle without character is just decoration, and every woman at that gym learned what real protection looks like when someone who cares about them decides enough is enough. Our story has come to an end. If you have made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I have selected 2 other videos for you that I am sure you will enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I will be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.